And recording right now. You're ready to go. First off, my name is Miles Burghoff. A lot of you know me for tournament fishing. You know, I went through the college ranks. Right now, I'm trying to fish, the opens to make the Elite Series. But many of you may know me from Sweetwater TV. It's the new show that came out last year. We're in our second season right now, and it's shown on NBC Sports, Sportsman's, and then later on Sun Sports. So that's a little bit about me. I came from Florida originally, but moved to California. And when I wanted to go to school, I figured that Florida would be a really good place because it was such a unique area. The lakes in that location, everybody, all the tournament anglers are just like, man, Florida kills me. That's the only state that I really just don't get it. So that's why I moved down there. And I learned very quickly that it's all about heavy cover. And we're not only going to be talking about vegetation, we're going to be talking a little bit about hard cover as well and how it relates to springtime fishing. Okay, so we'll move on here. And again, for those of you that just joined, this software is really interactive. You can ask me questions in the Q&A section there. Ask me any questions. If it's pertaining to the information that I'm talking about right here and then, go ahead and ask me the question, and I'm going to try to answer it as long as I see that there's a question asked, and then I'll but if it's not pertinent to what we're talking about, just go ahead and wait to the end. We're going to go ahead and do a Q&A, formal Q&A, and so yeah. And this presentation is presented by Navionics. Navionics facilitates all these webinars. It's not going to all be about Navionics. It's not a infomercial. Okay, so let's get right into it. Why flip in the spring? There's so many different techniques that you can use. So why flip? What is the attraction to flipping versus other techniques? Suspending jerkbaits or whatever you want to fish. First off, I'm very, very big on staying true to your strengths. And my strengths are fishing shallow, reading cover, and catching fish in really, really heavy cover. So that's why I stick with that. And if you're kind of like me, then this webinar is perfect for you. And if you're not, it's still perfect for you because you get to kind of learn some new things. But essentially, during the spring, you got different phases of the spring, which it revolves around the spawn. You got the pre-spawn, spawn, and the post-spawn. And all throughout those different phases, the bass are going to utilize cover for their migrations. Okay, they're going to be using isolated pieces of cover or large expanses of cover to conceal themselves, to relax. It's a very stressful time, and they utilize this cover in this migration. Now, the spring is also very stressful for fish. Fish really, they're going through a lot during the spawn, so they like to relax in cover. They don't like to be out roaming around too much, except for when they're looking for spawning beds. So they like to kind of relax. They like to, prop themselves up next to a big clump of reeds underneath the mat and just kind of relax. Same thing with the weather fronts. Weather fronts are another stressful factor for these fish. These fish are being bombarded daily by cold fronts. A lot of wind, a lot of cold wind, and a lot of rain. All kinds of different stuff going on. So those key pieces of cover are like safe havens for them. They're like our homes, their homes, and so they use them, to get out of the weather. And one key part of that is that you got to remember that during this time of year, a lot of the time, and pretty much the majority of the time, these fish have very small strike zones. The strike zone is, essentially the area that the fish is willing to move to attack a bait. And, during the pre-spawn, when they're in that heavy cover, the big females are waiting to move on top of the beds. They don't want to dart out of that cover to eat something. You need to pitch it right on top of them. Now, and during the spawn, no different. I mean, those the beds that they fan out, that's a strike zone. If you throw something outside of the bed, they're not going to hit it. But if you throw it right in the sweet spot, they're going to eat it. Hopefully. I don't like bed fishing all that much, but it doesn't always work out that way. But on the good days, it does. And then finally, there's some less pressured fish than the bedding fish. You know, when people are going and fishing for fish that are on the beds, that's a great opportunity for you to pull out of those areas where they're on the beds and focus on, you know, the fish that are tucked into the cover really close to where those beds are, because fish aren't going to spawn all at the same time. So keep that in mind. Now I'm going to go to the top real quick. I see some chat going around. Okay, so I got a really good question. This is I've got a question from Chuck. We've got when you mention spring, are you specifically talking about water temps or months of the year? How do you define spring? Spring is essentially it's kind of a change of events, a change of weather patterns. Okay, it's all relative to a certain year. Every year is different. This year we had a very long, warm spring, which, you know, the fish were spawning down here in Florida since October all the way through, you know, the new year. And the reason for that is that it was really warm. It was really stable. So that was kind of their spring. Now that we got some cold fronts, we're kind of delayed again, and we're going to have another round of spawning move in. So it's all relative. And I know that's kind of a frustrating answer, because you want to know, you know, exactly what the water temps are. And generally it's between 55 degrees is pre-spawn, and then spawn is around 62 to 68, depending on which part of the country you're in, what species you're fishing for. And then the post-spawn happens somewhere after that, you know, 72, 73 degrees, depending on how warm it or how fast it warms up. So just keep in mind that it's all about the relative weather patterns for that year. So if you have an extremely cold year and, you know, those fish aren't spawning, they're kind of stalled out in a winter pattern, then all of a sudden you get a week of just crazy warm weather. That's going to be your rushed spring. It's just going to happen real quick. So don't define it as far as set months or set temperatures, because it's all relative to what's going on right at that moment. So that's my answer to that one. All right, so understanding bass movements. This is kind of a textbook, you know, a definition for pre-spawn, spawn, and post-spawn. Essentially, pre-spawn is where the males are starting to make their way up to the bedding areas. You know, they're starting to roam. The water's starting to warm a little bit. You've had a couple of warmer days, not quite crazy, you know, hot temperatures, not bringing it up to spawning temperatures yet, but they're starting to move up. They're kind of active. The big females are starting to move up, and they're starting to get a little bit more active too. They're feeding up before the spawn. And so that can be a really good time, but it's still a really good time for flipping when they're under duress, when they're really stressed out and they've got these you know, big weather fronts coming through. They can really utilize that cover, and you can take advantage of that by flipping. And it's a really good time of the year to flip. Case in point, Florida. Every year somebody kills it down here, you know, punching mats. Down in Okeechobee, that's where all the tours start their year. At least the FLW tour has for years, and you know, that's a really good example. Spawn fish are up on the beds. You know, that there's the largest wave of fish on the beds, but there's still not all the fish on the beds. A lot of them are still going to be in pre-spawn, and some of them are even going to be in post-spawn, depending on how quickly that wave moves up. So, you know, the spawn is still a really good time to flip. It's actually one of my favorites, because a lot of guys will be focusing on the beds, and I'm either out fishing the real thick cover close to the beds, or I'm finding dirtier water that you can't see fish in, and flipping around the cover that the fish are spawning around, because bass will spawn around cover almost, you know, exclusively if it's available. So post spawn, opposite. Males are going to continue to gar fry. I forget about those guys. They're small. They're puny. I don't need those fish. I'm focused on the females. The females are stressed out. They want to relax. They are tired of the whole process. They're going back out to that cover that is really close to those spawning areas, the spawning pockets, the spawning bays. They're going to move out to that cover. So the post spawn can be a really, really good time. And okay, so what makes a good area? A good area during the spring, this is what I put a lot of emphasis on when I'm going out pre-fishing for a tournament or just, going fishing. I look for sheltered areas that are sheltered primarily from the wind. Okay, northern parts of the lake, areas that aren't getting that north wind, that really cold north wind, those are going to be key. It doesn't have to be on the north end. It can just be sheltered from that north wind, but the wind is the biggest killer in the spring. A cold wind, nothing can kill a bite faster than a north cold wind. Or if it's a southern cold wind, it's all it's all relative to what the water temp was to begin with. But what happens is that wind will start churning that water. It'll cool it down to the temperature of the wind, and then the fishing starts going downhill. So I also look for suitable spots for that have hard bottom for spawning. Let me just check one thing. Okay. Oh, go back. Sorry. And hard bottom is all relative too. Don't get me wrong. You're not only just looking for sand or rock or gravel. You're looking for anything that's relatively hard in an area that has a lot of fish. Okay, remember the Bassmaster Classic 2006, Lake Kissimmee. Luke Clausen goes down there and just obliterates everybody, fishing for bedding fish that are bedding at the roots of some of the spatter dock or the lily pads down there. So it's all relative. That was the hard bottom for those fish. But I generally look for those areas that have the really textbook, hard bottom. I kind of avoid kind of the off the wall stuff until I really have to try it. But I look for the areas that have sand, have gravel, things like that. Next, I look for stained water clarity. I'm a shallow water guy. I don't like fishing the super clear water during the spring, especially when I'm flipping. It's there's a whole lot of things that are a lot easier than flipping clear water, believe me. And I just don't like doing it. So if I know that I'm going to be fishing a flipping pattern, I'm going to go look for the stained water. And again, it's all relative. Everybody wants to look for clear water, but that is relative to the lake and the location that you're at. Okay, if you're up or down near the dam of some lake, and chances are a foot of water is going to be pretty darn muddy for that part of the lake, relatively muddy. If you go up the river and you find yourself a nice little spawning pocket that has a foot of visibility, that's like clear, relatively clear for that area. So it's all relative, but I like the stained water because I can creep up on those fish. They're not going to be as spooked, and I can catch those fish, and they're going to be more active. Okay, good lead-in cover. Good lead-in cover is so essential. I don't want anything that creates this giant barrier wall. Okay, I don't want a solid wall of anything. I want something that kind of funnels the fish in. Doesn't need to be completely open and then funneling the fish in, but I don't want it to be, just a solid wall, a hydrilla or whatnot. I like to have something that just has a little bit of a opening, a thin spot the fish can kind of funnel in. That way I can kind of pinpoint where those fish are most likely coming in and then spreading out from there. Okay, case in point, Okeechobee. A lot of times down on North Shore, which we're going to be talking about that soon, is you've got that large flat of hydrilla out there, and it kind of blocks the fish in some spots, but then there's the little funnels, the little boat lanes and stuff like that kind of open it up. And then you can just kind of predict where those fish are going to spread out from there, going on to the spawning flats. And then leading cover also means the mats, the isolated cover that's inside those spawning flats that they're going to stop on, in between spawning, before spawning, and after spawning. And then another really important factor is figuring out what areas are going to hold fish year round. A fish doesn't really want to travel miles and miles to find suitable, spawning area from where they winter or where they have their summer haunts. They want everything right there. They want the convenience store right there. They want their home right there. They want everything. So look for those areas that have the relatively deeper water and just kind of have all the qualities that allow them to live there during the summer, during the fall, during the winter. And that's really important. Once you find those areas, you're going to find a better population of fish. They're going to be healthier fish. They're not just going to be resident fish that live there. They're skinny, they're ugly, not the kind that you want. And they're not reliable either. And then I look for a good mix of cover, all different types of cover, whether it's willow bushes, whether it's junk mats, hydrilla, hyacinth, reeds, bulrushes, whatever it is. That's what I want, is a good mix of cover. Okay, so this is kind of an example of an area that it could be a good area. I fished this spot a lot, and I've caught a lot of fish in it. And if you guys fish Guntersville, you know exactly where it's at. It's no secret. It's just a good example because it's so blatantly obvious that it's right on the river channel. But this is essentially a little pocket, a little cove. It's sheltered from the north wind. It's a good little spawning area, and then it's right next to the main river channel. The fish can live their entire life cycle right there. There's going to be a huge population of fish that move in there. That would be one of the first places that I would target for a springtime fishing if I was to fish a tournament where those fish were moving into those kind of areas. All right, so here's this one gives me chills because I love Okeechobee. Okeechobee is like the best lake on the planet, and this is like the area that's been destroying, pretty much getting all the attention over the last like 10 years or something like that. This is like the North Shore area, and this is kind of how it's laid out. It's it looks exactly like this actually. I was able to redo it perfectly using my paint app. But anyways, so this dark green, stuff is all matted hydrilla out here. It's just a thick mat. And then you've got the little patches of hyacinth. You've got some big patches in there and the little patches. And then you've got the real sparse eelgrass. This is the kind of area that I look for. I look for the areas that have the opening, but they're surrounded by really thick, overgrown areas, because the opening spots is exactly where those fish are going to be spawning. Let's see, I can actually circle it. Oh my gosh, it's too confusing. So this area is like the spawning area. So think of this, the fish are going to kind of move in this way right here. They're going to kind of come in through these mats, which they're living in on either direction, and then they make their way onto this huge flat here. And there's these little isolated pieces or, patches of hyacinth mat. They could be as big as a car. They could be as small as the TV in the hotel here. They could be, way bigger, the size of a house. They hang out in all these isolated patches, but it's perfect because they're spawning out here, 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 here. And then they can pull into those mats when they get exhausted, they want to rest. So that's a really good area. That's why that area is so good. And then you got those eelgrass, or junk mats on the side of it, and that's like so good. I mean, I can't even stress to you how awesome junk mats are on Okeechobee. But yeah, that's a really good area for a grass lake. It's exactly what you're looking for. Oh, let me fix this real quick. Undo. Could have just pressed save or clear. All right, technical issues. All right, next. All right, so this is a concept that I really want to hammer home with you guys because it's something that I've really come to believe in, and it's kind of obvious, but once you put an emphasis on it, I think it'll help you out. Look for the areas, the isolated pieces of cover where vertical cover meets horizontal cover. And what I mean by that is vertical cover is any type of cover that's growing straight out of the ground, whether it's, willow bushes or reeds or bulrushes, whatever that is. It could be hydrilla, even though hydrilla isn't my very favorite during the spawn. But that could be vertical cover too. Horizontal cover is anything floating on the surface, anything that creates that ceiling. Okay, so when you have reeds mixed with hyacinth or junk mats, perfect situation, especially during the spring. Those big females love to rub up against the reed stalks. They like to rub up against the bushes, any of that to loosen the eggs. And it's a great opportunity for them to just kind of prop themselves up against something, relax. They don't have to move, and they have that cover over their heads. That's exactly what they need. It's the same thing as us in a house. That's what they want when they're under duress. They're all stressed out. They've got bad weather, and people fishing for them on the beds. That's exactly what they want. So good cover, again, thick vegetation close to prime spawning grounds, isolated patches of reeds with mixed in matted vegetation. That's like primo. That's perfect. I love that. Anytime you have bulrushes or reeds, especially bulrushes because they grow on harder bottom, which is really important to remember. The round reeds, they grow on the harder bottom than the cattails, because cattails kind of grow on the muck. So flooded brush, another really good situation, especially if it's like willow bushes. They're real fluffy. They got a lot of cover. Lay down trees. Lay down trees are really good, especially when they're on the beds. They're spawning. That's a really good time to fish the lay downs, especially if you have muddy water. People aren't sight fishing for them, but you can pinpoint where those fish are bedding if you know how a fish beds. A fish loves to fan out their bed right next to a piece of cover like a stump or something, because they don't have to completely protect 360 degrees. They can put their backs against that cover and protect whatever's left. And so it's really important to remember to fish laydowns when they're spawning. Good cover, again, hyacinth. The hyacinth is like awesome because it retains a lot of heat. It captures a lot of heat. They're like little solar panels. They're really good this time of year, really any time of the year. They've got a great root system. They've got a lot of things growing in there. A lot of animals are just around them. Bulrushes over here on the right-hand side, really good during the springtime, especially because they grow on the hard bottom. So the fish are going to spawn around them. They're also going to hang around them when they're stressed out. If they have a lot of horizontal cover mixed in there too. Then of course the laydowns down here, perfect spawning habitat for them. And then the bushes over here. I love willow bushes. Bad cover areas, just as important to know as good cover areas. Extremely overgrown areas of vegetation, not my cup of tea, not perfect for spawning because they're choked out. It's just not going to have a large population of fish in there. There's still going to be some fish, but overgrown areas, that I avoid those. Soft bottom grasses like lily pads, of course, we had talked about, how they can spawn on the roots of the pads. Not really going to be, that's pretty rare to find a situation where you're really going to kill them doing that. But so I try to avoid pads to begin with. I just don't like pads much, believe it or not. Algae covered grass mats. Those are not very good during the spawn. It just sucks up a lot of oxygen. The fish can't tell where they're going to be blown into and cover their beds. So just avoid those areas until the post spawn. Favorite type of cover, kind of went over this. I don't know why I have 2 slides, but anyways, hyacinth mats, junk mats. Junk mats are essentially all different types of stuff on Okeechobee and some of the Florida lakes. Coots, the little vegetation eating birds, they're going to cut up that grass. It's going to float to the top. The wind's going to blow it into the vertical cover, and you got these large junk mats, and the fish just love them. It's perfect. There's all kinds of stuff blown in there, and they use it. Toolies, bulrushes, and buggy whips, all of those grow on relatively hard bottom, sandy areas. Isolated patches of Kissimmee grass and maida cane, they also grow on harder bottom areas, sandier bottom, but I look for the really patchy spots that have the big holes in them. the big pockets and things like that that they're going to be making their beds in. Sparse hydrilla mixed in with reeds and bulrush, you know, and flooded willow bushes, just pretty common examples. Keys to reading cover. So fish are going to utilize cover as transition rest stops before and during after the spawn. So just keep that in mind when you're looking for an area. Start looking for those first the spawning areas, and then look back and just start seeing, you know, what type of cover could those big fish be hiding in. Don't look at an area and just be like, oh man, look at all this cover. There's a ton of cover. I bet there's a ton of fish in there. That's going to be really hard to break down. But if you look at an area from the aspect of, man, this is a really good spawning area, and now I can find the stuff that is really close to it where the fish are likely going to be hiding underneath, that's going to be perfect, you know, flipping material once you figure that out and you kind of read the area as far as that goes. Once you find a good spawning flat, look for thick isolated cover. That's what I just went over. Search for seams or transitions in the grass. When I'm fishing vegetation, especially, even if I'm fishing hardwood or bushes, it's so important for you to pay attention to those little details. You know, I was fishing a tournament at Douglas 2 years ago in Tennessee, and you know, the water was way up. The fish were in those willow bushes, but they're only in specific willow bushes and the specific size. It really paid off for me to pay attention to which bushes were really producing. And the same thing with vegetation. Pay attention to the type of vegetation you're catching them in, but also try to focus on those areas where two types of vegetation merge together, you know, come together. Even if it's not vertical meets horizontal, it could just be a junk mat mixing in with a hyacinth mat. That could be a really good spot. So just keep that in mind. All right, whether to flip. I get this question a lot as far as the type of weather. Type of weather to flip, and it changes year round. You know, during the summertime, it's when the sun is high up in the sky and the fish want, you know, shade. That's their main motivation. During the spring, during the colder months, even during the winter down in like Florida, those fish are going to be under those mats when it's cold and cloudy. No sun is warming up the rest of those flats. Those fish are just snuggled up in that mat. They're not moving much. That's when you want to target those really good flipping areas, that really good heavy cover, because those fish are just going to be a lot more stressed out. Their strike zone is going to be really small. And so I found cold and cloudy is the best. Even on a sunny day, you know, a lot of people will wait until the sun comes up and then they'll go flipping during a tournament. I do it the exact opposite. I go straight to my flipping stuff and I hit that first, because I know once the sun gets up, that water is going to start warming up. Those fish are going to move out of those mats and start soaking in the sun. It's just like us. You know, during the winter time, you know, it's really, you know, nice and warm in your house. You don't want to go outside when it's cold. You want to stay in the house. But when it's sunny, you want to go out there and soak up those rare rays that you don't really get that often during the winter time. And then in the summer, you want to go outside when it's, you know, somewhat cloudy, and inside when it's, you know, really, really hot. So think of it that way. Wind is, again, a big killer for flipping bite, and a lot of different bites during the spring, especially down here in Florida. When you have that cold wind, it really churns up that water, and it'll cool down that water a lot quicker. You know, a lot of people think, well, a cold, cloudy day is going to cool down the water a lot faster. Not true, because it's actually insulating. You've got that calm water that is dropping a little bit, but when you add wind to it, you're actually starting to turn it up. It's starting to cool down a lot faster. It's like spinning a beer can in the ice. You know, when you just put a beer can on top of ice, it just kind of, you know, it gets cold, but not as fast. But when you spin it, you know, or soda pop, whatever, if you're not at 21. So approaching a spring flipping scenario, I essentially have 3 rods rigged. Most of the time, I've got 1 punching rod, 1 fluorocarbon light flipping rod, and 1 braid light flipping rod. If the fish are suspected to be spawning, I head straight for the shallow spawning areas. That's where I start, and then I try to choose an area based on the water clarity, like we talked about, and try to look for those really muddy areas. But then once I catch all the fish that I think are up there spawning, and kind of want to expand upon things, I start making my way out, hit those isolated pieces of cover or whatever type of cover is available that those fish are going to be focused on, and start making my way out towards the outside edge. And that's how I kind of dissect that area, is I work from the spawning area all the way out. And it could be the exact opposite. If it's like pre-spawn, I know that they're not on the beds yet, I'll do the opposite and go the other way. But do one or the other, just kind of systematically go through it and just kind of envision it like how they would come in and spawn and how they would leave after the spawn. And one thing about how I approach specific pieces of cover, there's a lot of debate over this, but personally, I like to flip the outside of a mat. Imagine a mat of hyacinth. I like to flip the outside and then work my way in. And the reason behind that is that if I catch a fish, pitching straight to the center of it for the first pitch, then I feel like all those fish that could have been on the outside edge got spooked. So I like to fish from the outside, which, I mean, they still might spook the fish on the inside, but I feel like I could be able to catch 1 extra fish by doing that. And yeah, a lot of times the biggest fish are going to be on the best piece of or the thickest part of the mat. But I'm a tournament guy. I like to catch numbers too. So as far as the punching tackle that I use a 7.5 to 8 foot heavy power rod with either a fast or moderate fast action. A lot of people mix up power with action. And essentially with the punching tackle, I actually like to have that moderate action tip that it's almost like a swim bait rod, because it has this parabolic bend to it. You're really short lining these fish. You're only pitching out maybe 10, 15 feet, and you're using real heavy braid. So I want to have a lot of backbone, but I don't want to pull that weight out of that fish's mouth. And I feel like with those really fast action rods, that really stiff broomstick, I'm going to pull that big weight out of that fish's mouth, knock his mouth wide open, and the hook's going to go with it. So I like a kind of a moderate fast action. I use 65-pound vicious braid. This is the God honest truth. Love that braid. The braid, their braid is just outstanding. Haven't had any problems with it, and they just came out with a new formula that has better color, because I'm really big on coloring my braided line, making sure that it's as dark as possible underneath those mats, because it's all shade under there, and a real light green sticks out like dental floss. So I like to have it real dark, but good line. I use a 4/0 or 5/0 EWG Eagle Claw laser sharp hook, or a Trocar TK130, which is their straight shank flipping hook. I'm actually transitioning away from straight shank hooks nowadays, because I had no problem getting fish to the boat before straight shank hooks, and I find that I have a better hooking percentage with the EWG and a better landing percentage than I do with the straight shank. But that's still in the kind of the test phase. But either of those work really, really well. Just make sure that it's a real heavy gauge wire, and you're not going to straighten that out on some big fish. As far as the baits go, don't get super crazy with these. Really, essentially stay with a Z-Man punch craws style bait, which is essentially just a little tiny cricket style bait. It's designed for punching. It's real compact. The Turbo Cross is another one. You can see the picture on the right hand side. That one has a lot of action to it. When the fish are a little bit more active, they need a little bit more coaxing. That thing flapping in their face is perfect. Or the Palmetto Bugs, which is a beaver style bait. That one's really good as well. But I prefer the turbo craws and the punch craws more than the beaver style bait for punching, just because I'm more efficient getting it through the cover than with the beaver style. And then as far as the weights go, or let's talk about colors. I generally just stick with black and blue. The one that's kind of, it's black with silver flake in it. And then I also like, you know, a watermelon red, or maybe even a green pumpkin. But those 4 colors are perfect. Really, you're getting a reaction strike out of those fish, so you don't have to worry about it too much. 3/4 ounce to 2 ounce tungsten weight, depending on the cover. Try to go as light as possible, because the heavier the weight, the bigger the weight, and the bigger the weight, the more that fish's mouth is going to have to open up for when you set the hook, and that hopefully the hook buries into the top of their mouth. But when you pull up, set the hook on a fish that ate a big weight, his mouth is going to open up just that much wider, and your hook stands a chance of following through, and you miss those fish. So just keep that in mind. 1.25 ounce tungsten weight, perfect. Punch skirts are optional. I get this question a lot. The punch skirts are great. I use them if I'm on a lake that is known for its jig fishing. Then I am most definitely going to try the punch skirt first off. But if it isn't known for its jig fishing, but the fish are really just not in an eating mood, and they're not hitting on the initial fall, you actually have to coax them, then that's a situation where I use a punch skirt, because it adds that little bit of undulation. Even when it's just sitting there, it's still moving a little bit. So if the bite's really tough and you have to kind of soak that bait in that heavy cover, go ahead and put a punch skirt on it. I think you'll actually do pretty well with that. Light flipping gear. This is, you know, for you guys that have flooded bushes and lay downs and just you're fishing reeds and stuff like that. Light flipping gear is pretty much all you need. And by light, I mean, you know, 7/6 medium heavy to heavy power. For me, that's light, because punching's, you know, so heavy. But I like the fast action. I really like that really quick responsive rod for regular flipping. That's what we'll call it, regular flipping. So this is I like to use 20 to 25 pound test Vicious Pro Elite fluorocarbon when I'm fishing hard cover, such as bushes, laydowns, anything that's wood. Fluorocarbon is a much better choice than braid, because braid will actually cut into that hard cover, and it's going to create a lot of problems for you. So the fluorocarbon is really good, and I haven't had any issues since I started using the Pro Elite, and I really love it. It's not the best on spinning rods as far as having memory. I use it on all my spinning rods as a leader, because I use braid, but in general, it's really good. And for that one, I stick with the EWG 4/0 or 5/0. I can hook a fish in the cheekbone and get that fish in the boat every single time, versus a straight shank that hooks it in the top of the mouth, which sometimes it's not in there very good. So I really do like the EWG if I'm just light flipping. And again, the palmetto bugs or flapping craws, those are my 2 favorite styles. So a beaver style bait, and then a flapping craw style bait. I like the flapping craw style bait when it's a little bit warmer, maybe the post spawn. And then the palmetto bugs pretty much the rest of the time, because bluegill is a really big food for bass during the spawning period, during the spring. So, and those just have that kind of wide bluegill profile that kind of glides. Not that it looks exactly like it, but it looks enough like it for those fish to be like, oh, that might be a bluegill. And then I use 3/16 ounce to 3/4 ounce tungsten weights, obviously pegged for both the flipping and the punching. All right, so this is one thing I have to mention, because it's one of my big pet peeves. I'm kind of you know, anal when it comes to bass fishing. Some things, you know, flipping especially, but try to be like a hunter. I don't understand why people go out there and are just, you know, constantly acting like a bull in a china shop when they're fishing heavy cover. I know it's tough to get through that stuff, and you got to make a you know, some amount of noise. But the argument is, well, I still catch fish and I still make a lot of noise. Okay, well, I can catch more fish by being quieter. You know, you are essentially a hunter out on the water. That's all you are. We're hunting. And so avoid casting a shadow over whatever you're trying to flip. That's a big one that not a lot of people think of. So try not to keep the back or the sun at your back, casting a shadow over the cover you're fishing. That's really important. That's like, I mean, a big no-no. The fish know you're there if you cast a shadow. And be aware of the noise that you're making in the boat. When I'm fishing a tournament and I'm flipping, I tell my co-angler, you know, hey, listen, I know that we're going to be making some noise today, but go ahead and please just don't be slamming anything down on the bottom of the boat, closing the hatches, and I promise I'll do the same. We'll catch more fish that way. So be careful with the noise that you're making. Use the right trolling motor prop. Okay, I use the new Motor Guide X5. Great trolling motor, by the way. It's awesome. And the one thing that I hear from people about Motor Guide is that they don't go through grass all that well compared to Minn Kota. Not true at all. The problem is that all of their motors except for the new X5 come with a 3-bladed prop. 3-bladed prop is excellent for thrust and maximum power, but it is awful. I mean, plain awful in grass. Okay, it's not good in grass because it just doesn't sweep the grass away. It's, I mean, they advertise it as being decent in grass, and I mean, it can make it through the day. But if you really care about, you know, being quiet and catching more fish and heavy cover, get a 2-bladed prop like the Safari 2-bladed prop, which sweeps that grass away from it, and it'll go through the grass a lot better. You're not going to go as fast. You're not going to have as much thrust, but you're going to make it through the grass a lot easier. And so I recommend, you know, changing the props. If you have a Minn Kota, you already have the 2-bladed prop. They have a really good prop on their motors, and those work really good. But if you have the new X5, then you've already got the 2-bladed prop. Use a constant low speed, the lowest speed that you possibly can while going through the cover. Try to maneuver around the you know, the cover that you're fishing. Don't just barrel right through it. You know, the low speed, the constant low speed is really important, because if you keep on constantly stepping on and off the button with a higher speed, you're just making a ton of noise, and it puts the fish on edge. But if there's this constant humming in the background, it's really not going to be that big of a deal. So you know, just keep that in mind. Avoid hitting the prop against something hard. Never backwash a flipping spot. You know, never turn the trolling motor around and backwash a spot to slow down. Just always be paying attention to the cover that you're going to flip next, and be the best boat, you know, maneuverer that you possibly can. Just maneuver around those areas. Make sure that you're thinking about your next flip and making sure that you don't backwash those areas, because it's really easy to you know. You know, bass are like turkey. I hear from everybody that's a turkey hunter that turkey are really hard to hunt for, and you have to be really quiet. You have to be, you know, just really careful. But you know, bass aren't like deer. I'm not a hunter, but from what I hear, you know, the deer are a little bit easier than turkey. Hunters might agree, they might disagree. But anyways, bass can be very difficult to catch if you disturb them. But yeah, that is actually it for the main presentation. But I do want to answer questions for everybody. You know, I do want to thank you all for coming, and hopefully that was pretty informative, right on the money, you know, 45 minutes. Let me answer this question. How long do you stick with a bait that's not catching fish before moving on? That's a really good question. And again, I'm going to give you a frustrating answer, because fishing, there's no real textbook for fishing, or at least the fish don't read the same textbook. There's no set amount of time that I will fish with a bait before switching. Generally, like I said, I'm only using a couple different types of bait for flipping heavy cover. So I will listen to my own gut instincts, and you're going to foster those. You're going to grow those over time. After being out on the water for a long time, you're going to know exactly when to switch. So really the best answer is to just get time on the water and learn when to switch, and learn to, trust your gut instincts. If you feel like you need to change, like they're maybe not eating the palmetto bugs, but now they're focusing more on the turbo craws, that's, just kind of pay attention to that. I will say this: when it's warmer, try to focus on more action style baits. When it's colder or clearer, focus on the baits that don't do a whole lot, like the palmetto bugs, the beaver style baits that kind of glide. So just go out there and change it up. Really, just for me, it's more, once I've isolated it to those basic designs. Okay, so I know that the fish are going to eat one of those designs. So I'll just switch between those different designs. And if I'm not getting bit based on that, then it's some other factor that's wrong. It's the area, and it could be that they're just not in that cover, or whatever. So yeah, that's a hard one to answer with any definitive. What gear ratio do I recommend for flipping? A really good question. I like to use, not super fast, but I like to use a 6.3 or 6.1 or something like that, all the way to 7. 7 is for punching, because I need to get that big old weight back to the boat before it hits the side of the boat, and I lose another $100 on the resale value. But the lower speed is better for when you're just regular flipping. You get more torque out of a lower gear ratio reel, and so I don't go up to the Speed Freak Quantums for flipping very often, because I get less torque and I need a little bit of that. So I'd say 6.3 to 7.1 or something like that is a good gear ratio. If I had to choose one bait to use around this time of year, what would it be and why? That's another really good question. And if you mean as far as flipping goes, it would be a beaver style bait, no questions asked. I can use that. I can flip that all day long and be extremely confident that I'm making the right choice, because of the fact that I'm going to be fishing around bass that are, number one, eating bluegill, and number two, killing bluegill because they hate them, because it's like their arch nemesis when they're spawning, because they're constantly robbing the beds. But yeah, I like that wider profile bait. The palmetto bugs is really good. And the good thing about a palmetto bugs is it's made of Elastec, so it has a really high buoyancy to it. So if I'm fishing in an area that has a little bit more silt on the bottom, it sticks straight up when it's on the bottom. And that's really good for inactive fish that don't bite on the initial fall. But yeah, beaver style bait, palmetto bugs, that's the one. Anybody else? Well, I'm going to stay on here for a minute, but so here's another question. Any tips on how I can improve my flipping? Absolutely. Do what we all started out doing, and just get yourself, a good flipping stick, a 7.5 foot heavy action rod, the reel that we just talked about, and then get out there and in your yard, take a coffee can and just flip right into it. Now, as far as the technique, keep in mind, flipping historically is that technique where you're taking line out. Oh shoot! You're taking line from the reel and you're flipping it like this, like pendulum style. Now, a lot of us primarily do pitching, which is you're essentially doing an underhand, pitch. You're holding the lure in your hand and then pitching pendulum style, gives you more distance, and you can vary the distance that you're actually going to be casting. So 90% of the time you're going to be pitching, not the traditional flipping. Flipping is really good for when you're fishing a straight line of some type of cover, whether it's, you know, a line of hydrilla or a line of reeds. So try both, but focus more on your pitching skills. And once you start getting good, you can actually pitch without touching that lure. You can just go ahead and pitch it in that cup. But try that. Punching's the same thing as pitching. It's just a different tackle. So just spend time doing it, and go out there, you know, fish the best cover that we talked about, and you should get a lot of you know, really exciting days out there. Another question I have is how many times do I do these, or how often do I do these webinars? I'm going to be doing them for the next few months. I think my next 2 webinars are going to be in March. You can go to this link right here, and you can sign up for the next one. So the next one's going to be on finding pre-spawn pattern bass, or pre-spawn bass patterns. It's going to be on March 11th at 8 p.m. and that's the link for it right there. So you can take some time to write that down. And then, of course, you know, you can also follow me on my Facebook page. I have my personal Facebook page, and then I have my business page that I just opened, and that one's under Miles, quote unquote, Sonar Burghoff. And then I've got Instagram, Sonar, at Sonar Fishing, and then I have Miles Burghoff under Twitter, and then you can find me on YouTube too under Sonar Fishing. And then yeah, you can follow me on those platforms, and then you can also see me on Sweetwater too. So if you haven't seen the show, go to the Sweetwater Facebook page, Sweetwater Fishing TV, or you can go to sweetwaterfishingtv.com and watch all the episodes that have already aired. Yeah, just keep in touch with me there, and you'll see the webinars as they come. So thank you guys so much. I really appreciate. Oh, I've got another question. On your Guntersville example, the cove you showed, since Gville is almost entirely grass and milfoil, what would you suggest to flip on this time of lake in the spring? During the spring on Guntersville, I look for the ugliest stuff imaginable in the backs of these pockets. There's something that I call gator grass. I don't know what they call it up there really, but it's just this viney, you know, clump, and it can be in really shallow water, but fish hang around it. Fish reeds. There is some milfoil that time of year in those pockets. So fish that stuff. But as far as flipping goes, I fish the laydowns, I fish the reeds, and I fish that ugly gator grass. And those are the main things that I flip. Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate you coming, man. Thank you guys very much. Please go to my social media pages. You know, just, you don't have to like my social media pages, but you can find more information out on them. And I'll stay on here for a little bit longer, see if there's any more questions. But for those of you that are signing off, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Join me for the next one. Oh, by the way, sonarfishing.com. It's my website. There's too many websites I need to answer or throw out there. Thanks, Ken. I will see you at the Classic. It's going to be an awesome one. All right, I'm going to stop recording right now. Thanks, guys.